Good evening. This is the March 24th, 2011 meeting. May. What a great start. We start over. This is the May 24th meeting of the Board of Education. I will note that there are 7 board members in attendance. None are absent. We have been in closed session for the purposes of employment of employee, collective negotiations, and approval of closed session minutes of April 26th and May 10th. Would you please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If there are no objections from board members, I would like to take our agenda just a little bit out of order this evening and go directly to some action that will be taken out of closed session. Is there a motion, please? Mrs. Hirsch.
Mrs. Deroni, I move that the Board of Education approve the appointment of Mr. John Glimko as the Bryan Middle School principal effective July 1st, 2011.
Is there a second?
I'd say.
It's been moved by Mrs. Hirsch, seconded by Mrs. Stufen to approve the appointment of Mr. John Glimko as Bryan Middle School principal. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Hirsch.
We had an opportunity to meet Mr. Glimko earlier this evening during closed session and chat for a couple of minutes about his education philosophy and what he's looking to bring. Mr. Glimko brings a wealth of experience coming to our district and introducing him to the middle school level. He most recently was working with the Regional Office of Education and has many, many years of experience working with young adults. And I'm very, very excited about the opportunity for Mr. Glimko and for our students and staff at Bryan Middle School. I think this is a great hire. It will be difficult to replace Mr. Hillman, but we benefit from having Mr. Hillman move into a new position here within the central office. So welcome, Mr. Glimko. Congratulations, and we're all looking forward to working with you.
I might say that the reason we're doing this out of order is he has a family function at another school to attend this evening, so we want to be conscious of that. Is there any other discussion? Roll call. Mrs. Walsh, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Ms. Ebner? Yes. Mrs. Droney?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
7 ayes, no nays. That motion carries. Congratulations and welcome, Mr. Glimko. For the record, he said he's going to an orchestra concert, and he's appreciative of being here in this wonderful community. Thank you for your comments. Moving along, we have several recognitions this evening. Some of the board officers are going to help me with this. Who goes first? Mrs. Hirsch?
I have the opportunity to celebrate and read the proclamation for our FCCLA, but I'd like to introduce our leader for this, Ms. Wendy Albert.
Good evening. My name is Wendy Albert. I am the Department Chair for Family and Consumer Sciences at York High School. I'd like to thank the school board and Dr. Krzik for honoring the accomplishments of our FCCLA students this evening. I'd also like to thank our FCCLA advisors, Lindsay Weatherford, Sarah Merrick, Rachel Kania, Sabrina Ibrahim, and Ashley Egley, as well as all the parents and families who have supported our students and helped them through our competition season. Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America, or FCCLA, is the nation's second largest student leadership organization with over 205,000 active members in 6,500 chapters across the nation. Students enrolled in family and consumer science education classes have the opportunity to become involved in FCCLA and allows them to link their family and consumer science classroom to their families, careers, and communities. Through FCCLA, students have the opportunity to develop leadership and life skills such as planning, goal setting, problem solving, decision making, and interpersonal communication skills necessary for success in the home and the workplace. At York, our FCCLA students are involved in a number of different activities, including leadership conferences, competitions, and community service projects throughout the school year. The students being recognized tonight competed at the regional level, receiving scores that qualified them to move on to the state level competition. The students received medals based on their overall scores, and this encourages them to try and do their personal best at each of the different levels at the competition. Additionally, the students are awarded the most outstanding distinction if they have the highest quality product in their class. We're going to be announcing the students kind of in a couple of groups. So our first group that'll be coming on in, Riley, over here. Our first group that's coming in are our culinary arts students. And these students competed in Springfield, Illinois this past April. In the area of culinary arts, our students compete in 2 categories of events. The first category is called the Culinary Arts Star Event, and this is an intense kind of Iron Chef style battle. The students are given a menu, and in a team of 3, they have an hour to cook the menu, plate the menu, and present it to the judges. And they're evaluated on everything from, their knife skills to their cooking skills to, of course, taste and appearance of the food product. Riley Luring, step forward. And Eric Nerson received bronze medals in the culinary arts competition. The next category of events are the proficiency events, including pastry, arts, cookie decorating, salad design and display, relish tray, display, and entrepreneurship catering or cake decorating. In entrepreneurship cake decorating, students design a cake around client specifications. They cost out the cost to actually make the cake. They plan out the production and delivery of the cake, and then at the competition, they actually decorate the cake in front of the judges. Alex Stupka received a gold medal for her cake decorating project. Receiving silver medals in cake decorating were Kate Lawrence and Alexandra Ortiz. And Connor O'Ryan received a bronze medal in cake decorating. In the cookie decorating competition, students design and display a cookie centerpiece based on a specific theme. Melissa McKay received a gold medal for her Oh, the Places You'll Go graduate Dr. Seuss themed cookie. Melissa's project was also awarded the most outstanding distinction, so she had the highest honor in the state for this category. In the catering competition, students design, prepare, and display a menu based on a specific client request for an event or an occasion. Students also design a business portfolio with paperwork for their catering company. Jason Klapoff received a gold medal for his catering project. And Haley Catalano also received a gold medal in the most outstanding distinction. Next, I'd like to introduce Sabrina Ibrahim, who's going to tell you a little bit about the fashion and design competitions.
Good evening, my name is Sabrina Ibrahim. And in the clothing and fashion area, students competed in the construction of sportswear, semi-formal, casual dress, two-piece, prom wear, and lined garments. Students constructed garments inside and outside of school time. The judges scored students on everything from fabric choice and overall appearance to construction details and fit of the garment. The following students received medals in apparel construction. Alana Moritz and Nicole Carey received gold medals. Receiving silver medals were Angela Gomez, Dylan Rutz, Margaret Lippert, Julia Lafsidis. Marjorie Solis. In the category of fashion apparel display, students design and construct a display for a specific event or occasion. Students showcase their merchandising skills through the construction of the display. They demonstrate their speaking and listening skills through the preparation of an oral presentation and response to judges' questions and feedback. Receiving gold medals in fashion apparel display were Caitlin Neeram, and Elizabeth Bowen. In the interior design competition, students create interior design boards to meet a specific client specification each year. Their boards include scaled floor plans, furnishings, and samples of colors and material swatches. Sarah Carlquist and Kyle Metters received silver medals for their designs. In the professional career image competition, students prepare a fashion portfolio of a coordinated work wardrobe for a 1-week period. Students base their portfolio around an individual client specification and a given budget. Students also present one coordinated outfit to the judges. Anna Sidimorova received a gold medal in this category. And now I would like to introduce Rachel Kenya for the next group of students.
Good evening, I'm Rachel Kenya, and in the child development area, students competed in the preschool lesson and storytelling events. In the preschool lesson event, students prepare a curriculum-based lesson for a group of children between the ages of 3 and 5. Students develop teaching aids and address strategies for diverse learners. The lesson is presented before the judges. Receiving gold medals in the preschool lesson were Jacqueline Pastowovic and Megan O'Brien. Due to the large number of storytelling competitors at the state level this year, students were divided into different judging groups, with each group of judges awarding a most outstanding title. Receiving gold medals for their storytelling presentation of Froggy Goes to School are Kim Smaga and Nicole Barton. Christina O'Connor and Rita Worth were awarded the Most Outstanding distinction and received gold medals for their presentation of The Lonely Moose. Also receiving the Most Outstanding distinction in team storytelling were Tara Mitchell and Laurel Miner for their presentation of The Mitten. And last but not least, our 2 freshman students who competed for the first time at the regional FCCLA competition this past February. They presented an engaging rendition of the Caldecott honored book, Owen. The girls not only were awarded gold medals at the regional level as well as the state, but received the Most Outstanding distinction at both levels as well. Congratulations to the storytelling team of Kelsey Mills and Michelina Bomer. And congratulations to all competitors for their hard work and involvement in FCCLA this year.
The board wants to as well add our congratulations to all of the students who have worked so hard all year and have had such great success. And it is my honor to read a proclamation. Whereas the Family and Career and Community Leaders of America, FCCLA, State Competition Award Program is acknowledged throughout the nation as a prestigious student recognition program in family and consumer sciences related education. And whereas this program encourages excellence on the part of individual students and encourages them to pursue careers requiring specific skills, and whereas the following York Community High School students earned top positions in the state competition in the following categories: cake decorating, gold, Alex Stupka; silver, Catherine Lawrence and Alejandra Ortiz; bronze, Connor Orion; catering, gold, Most Outstanding, Haley Catalano. Gold, Jason Klapoff. In Cookie Decorating, Gold, Most Outstanding, Melissa McKay. Culinary Arts, Bronze, to Riley Luring and Eric Nearson. Fashion Apparel Construction, Gold, to Nicole Carey and Alana Moritz. Silver, to Angela Gomez, Julia Lefsidis, and Margaret Lippert, Dylan Rutz, and Marjorie Solis. Fashion Apparel Design, Gold, to Liz Bullen and Caitlin Neeram. Interior Design, Silver, to Sarah Carlquist and Kyle Metters. Preschool Lesson, Gold, to Nicole Barton, Megan O'Brien, Jacqueline Pestuovic, and Kimberly Smaga. Professional Career Image, Gold, Anna Sidimarova. Storytelling, Gold, Most Outstanding, Michelina Bomer, Kelsey Mills, Laurel Miner, Tara Mitchell, Christina O'Connor, and Rita Worth. And whereas these accomplishments bring pride and prestige to York Community High School, to District 205, and to our community, now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education and Administration of Elmhurst Community Unit School District 205 express congratulations to these students and the faculty of the Family and Consumer Sciences Department for their outstanding achievements. That's a lot of students that have done really great work. Congratulations to all of you. Okay, now you can. Our next recognition is for the Illinois Drafting Educators Association, and I believe Mr. Ken Ross is going to come up and speak to us about this award.
I said this will be shorter than the previous group of students who did a fabulous job. Again, my name is Ken Ross, Department Chair for Industrial Technology, and every year around the same time in April, we have our competitions. First of all, I'd like to thank the school board and Dr. Krizik for giving me the opportunity to come here tonight to honor our students and their wonderful accomplishments. I'd also like to congratulate and welcome all the new school board members tonight. It's probably the best time to come in when you see all the wonderful success that we have with our students. Good way to start the year off. I'd also like to thank Ms. Diana Smith and her administration for their support in the building. Their support really helps our kids out and keeps us going in the right direction, giving us the resources that we need to be able to compete at the state level in all of our competitions. Your support gives us the opportunity to educate and train our students for a successful future and participate in these exciting career-building competitions. Behind me, so I don't get out of the way, well, I'll just wait until we get done here with the IDA. Ms. Wall is not here tonight. She has school, so she wouldn't be able to be here tonight, but she is our instructor in the CAD area. And the first competition we're going to be recognizing tonight is our IDEA competition. So if Nick, you want to come on up? Go ahead, shake the hands over. No, this is awesome. This is awesome. Sure. Sure. IDEA is the Illinois Drafting Educators Association competition. That's one more competition that we work through our drafting CAD program. IDEA promotes the field of drafting education by working closely with schools and private industry. Student competitors are required to use the skills and knowledge learned in class and create CAD drawings to represent the concept presented or the challenge that the competition brings. This year, there were more than 120 drafting CAD contestants at the regional competition held at the College of DuPage in February. Nick and 2 fellow students from York placed in the top 3 in their respective areas of concentration, and all 3 competed at the state level event. I would like to congratulate Nick Cosentino for placing 2nd in the state for introductory CAD at the State Illinois Drafting Educators Association competition held this past April in Bloomington, Illinois. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Nick. You got to stand there while I read this proclamation. Congratulations to you. I know it's a little lonely standing there by yourself, but maybe you can influence some of your friends to really step it up and try to have more students doing this next year. But congratulations to you. And if I may, whereas the Illinois Drafting Educators Association, IDEA, awards program is recognized throughout the state as a prestigious student recognition program in industrial arts education, specifically advancing the drafting occupation through better education. And whereas this program encourages excellence on the part of individual students and encourages them to pursue careers in drafting-related fields. And whereas York Community High School student Nicholas Cosentino placed 2nd in the introductory computer-aided drafting and design category. And whereas this accomplishment brings pride and prestige to York Community High School, to District 205, and to our community, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education and Administration of Elmhurst Community Unit School District 205 express congratulations to this student and the faculty of the Industrial Technology Department for this outstanding achievement. Congratulations, Nick.
Thanks. Okay, if the other students can come on up, please, from Skills. All right. Now I'd like to talk about the Skills USA organization and our competition. Behind me, to my left, is Mr. Ron Broback. He is our auto tech instructor at York High School. And to my right is Joe Stoles. He is our graphic arts instructor. And they're here tonight to show support for the students that they helped instruct throughout the school year as we went downstate to compete. A little background on Skills. It's a national student organization that has over 305,000 student and instructor members organized in 54 state and territorial associations. Skills USA provides quality educational experiences for students in leadership, teamwork, citizenship, and character development. Skills USA also establishes industry standards for job skill training in the classroom and promotes community service for our students. Skills USA is recognized by the U.S. Department of Education and is cited as a successful model of employer-driven youth development training by the U.S. Department of Labor. Career and technical education courses at York incorporate content-appropriate reading, writing, math, and speech skills. It's important to note that students who compete at the state level are required to demonstrate these skills during their competitions. In February, students, except for the principles of technology and full-service auto, take a written test, which is also taken by students throughout the state to see who will qualify for the state skills competition. And all of our tests are based upon standards and which the industry has put forth. At the state level, most Skills USA competitions require a rigorous 4 to 6 hour hands-on project or activity to demonstrate the student's ability to think, problem solve, and perform in their area of specialty. This year, York Skills USA students competed in automotive tech, drafting CAD, cabinet making, graphic communications, screen printing technology, and principles of technology. We had 7 students in auto tech that qualified for state, 3 in cabinet making, 3 students in graphic communications, 2 students in screen printing technology, and 4 students in principles of physics technology qualified for this competition. At this time, I'd like to recognize our state winners that placed in first, second, or third in their competitions. First, I'd like to congratulate our Principles of Technology student, Santiago Ortega, who placed second. And unfortunately, Nick Freitag could not be here tonight. He placed first in his competition in state. This competition required the students to choose a physics concept, write a research paper, present and demonstrate their physics concept, and be able to defend their position in front of a panel of judges. Next, I'd like to congratulate Trevor Gully for placing second in the Adobe Photoshop competition. This competition required the student to take given photos and graphics and manipulate them through the computer program to present a finished product that you would see in a magazine or some kind of printed medium. Next is Zane Johns for placing second in full service auto. This competition required the student to work closely with an instructor and identify and diagnose different problems with a car and make the proper repair or offer what the repair would be. And so congratulations to these 3. In addition, for Nick, by taking first place, he's going to be representing Elmhurst District 205, York High School, and the state of Illinois by competing against students at the Skills National Conference and Competition in Kansas City, Missouri, this June 20th through the 25th. These hardworking, skilled young people, along with the students in Skills USA and IDEA, who did not place in the top 3 in the state level, getting ahead of myself, represented York High School and our community very well, and we are very proud of them. Congratulations to all the winners, and thanks again for your support.
And I have the privilege of reading this proclamation. Whereas the Skills USA state competition is acknowledged as a prestigious student recognition program in industrial arts education that provides quality educational experiences for students in leadership, teamwork, citizenship, and character development, in addition to promoting community service. And whereas this program encourages excellence on the part of individual students and encourages schools to establish industry standards for job skill training in the classroom. And whereas York Community High School students Trevor Gully earned second place in Adobe Photoshop, Zane Johns earned second place in full service auto, and in Principles of Physics Technology, Santiago Ortega placed second and Nicholas Freitag placed first, which advances him to the Skills USA national competition in June. And whereas these accomplishments bring pride and prestige to York Community High School, to District 205, and to our community. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education and Administration of Elmhurst Community Unit District 205 express congratulations to these students and the faculty of the Industrial Technology Department for this outstanding accomplishment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're good. Thank you very much.
We made you stand up there for a long time, didn't we? You know, in my professional career, as we interview students coming out of school, we're often asked, what is the primary thing you're looking for? What is number one? My answer to that is a track record of success. And to Trevor, Zane, Santiago, Nick, all the FCCLA award winners, and Nick, the IDEA award winner, I say you're well on your way to establishing that track record. Congratulations to all of you. Now, I have one more recognition to present, and it's not to a student. It's to one of our very own staff members. And as kind of a precursor, let me just read something that was written by our own Malia Smith. On May 12th, Elmhurst District 205 received notification that it had been awarded a Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting from the Association of School Business Officials. According to the notification letter, this award was for excellence in presentation and issuance of the financial year 2009-2010 School System Report, the High-Quality Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, or CAFR, for the fiscal year end 2010. This award, which is the highest recognition for school district financial operations offered by the Association for School Business Officials, is only conferred to school systems that have met or exceeded standards of the program. This submissal of the CAFR is a validation of the credibility of the district's financial operations, measured by the integrity and technical competence of the business staff. Receiving this Certificate of Excellence is a remarkable achievement and reflects the district's attention to detail, exemplary commitment, transparency, and responsibility with its financial resources. This is the second consecutive year District 205 has received this recognition, which positively affects our bond rating and serves as an indicator of overall financial well-being. So congratulations first to District 205's internal auditor, Helen Perez, and to Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Patricia Masterson, and to the entire business office staff on this accomplishment. Now, that's a precursor to the other reason I'm standing up here. In addition, Pat Masterton was honored by the Illinois Association of School Business Officials this past week as the 2011 recipient of the Ronald Everett Distinguished Service Award. Ms. Masterton is being recognized for making significant contributions to her field through dedicated effort, diligence, superior performance, and achievement in service. She, along with one of her peers, will be the first female school business official to receive this award, presented in May at the Illinois Association of School Business Officials annual conference. And if I can point out, since 1970, Pat will be one of only 22 people to receive this award. As you know, Pat will be retiring in October. This is a lifetime achievement, or a career achievement award. So Pat's not only being honored for her work in Elmhurst, but also her previous work in Addison, District Number 4, Fremont School District Number 79 in Mundelein, and in Maine Township High School District Number 207 in Park Ridge. The purpose, and if I can just add a little personal story, the purpose of one of my first meetings when I was elected to the Board of Education, my first meetings with Pat was to see if she could explain to me the Byzantine accounting structure, the methods used for school district accounting in Illinois. During our discussion, I think Pat summed up the essence of her professional philosophy when she said, "Jim, I always overestimate expenses and I underestimate revenues." I think it's that simple philosophy, which is why during her career, she has kept 4 school districts out of financial harm's way. We're glad that the Illinois Association of School Business Officials have publicly recognized Pat for her achievements.
That concludes our recognitions this evening. That's a lot on our plate. I want to also thank all of the parents and students who were able to be with us tonight. We know the parents play a not insignificant part in these achievements. And I hope that as you go on through your careers, students, whether you take these skills that you've learned into a career of its own, or whether this just becomes something that you got an award that you did in high school, that you will know that we are very proud of you and you should be proud of yourselves. We will go on with our agenda after taking a short break to allow anyone who needs to leave, homework, basketball games, whatever might be going on. We'll resume in just a few minutes. The next item on our agenda is public comments. We have two people who have indicated they'd like to speak to the board this evening. When you come to the podium, please turn on the microphone and give us your name and address for the record, please. The first speaker is Jacob Hill.
Okay, makes sense, red light. Jacob Hill, 364 Hillside. I'll be speaking to the issue of the York Stadium issues and opportunities. I see some familiar faces, and some people may recognize me as being involved with the York Stadium issue since it first came up, actually last spring, but started moving through some processes back in September, but I'm pleased to be able to be here to talk to the school board and say my personal observations that some of the recent developments that I've been involved with. I have been speaking to some different groups that are involved with District 205 regarding the proposal for new stadium lighting, and I want to say that these new opportunities that have arisen, I don't want to say that I'm representing any of my neighbors necessarily, although I have been involved in the issue and I have been speaking with a lot of neighbors that live adjacent to the stadium. But I want to say that the recent developments have been extremely positive. Perhaps one of the first, I'd say for the stadium neighbors, one of the first very positive developments that I think is a consensus. We're all able to have some consensus and get behind some of the recent developments. And I'm speaking specifically to the new lights that are going to be proposed tonight. We've been talking with several members of the York Boosters, and I think that this is the first chance we've seen where there's an opportunity for an actual reasonable, balanced dialogue between neighbors and the school district and York High School and the York Boosters. I don't think by any means it's going to end the issues. There are still some areas of major concern. One of them would be the sound issues as well. It goes hand in hand with the lighting issues, and that's still of major concern to the local residents. However, instead of working on separate tracks to achieve some reasonable outcomes to this whole issue, I think this is the first time where I think a lot of the neighbors and the York Boosters and perhaps District 205 can come together and start a reasonable dialogue on these issues and find some fair and equitable solution for all parties. I did actually, with the assistance of the York Advisory Committee and the York Boosters, we did post a letter that basically states that we support this York Lights proposal. and made available for signature on the internet. It was actually only up for about 48 hours. We've been working on an accelerated time frame. But in that 48 hours, we've got 25 households that are adjacent to the stadium to signal their agreement with this latest development. So I think that's a very, very positive outcome in the short time frame we've had available to us. And I think definitely considering with what we've been working with over the past 10 months, that's our first major sign of progress. Perfect. I'd like to continue that dialogue.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Greg Gills.
It's a bit unusual for me. I'm usually I'm good. I'm used to addressing my Board of Education in District 200, Wheaton-Warrenville, where I taught for 37 years. Opportunity knocks, they say. But when it knocks, there are a few things that are incumbent upon the listener. You not only have to hear the knock, you have to recognize where there's the doorway. Because rarely does opportunity walk right in your front door. It knocks. But you first have to find a door. And after you find that door, you not only have to know how to open it, you have to know how to dialogue with opportunity. Because that's all it promises, an opportunity. I've been a neighbor of York High School for my 60 years. My family is the third generation in the same house, right across from that athletic field, when they used to grow corn there, and it was a farmhouse. I went to York, I wrestled for York, played football for York, coached wrestling for 18 years, taught for 37, and I hear opportunity. I hear a knock, I recognize the doorway, and I believe I understand a dialogue. I am excited to be a new member of the York Advisory Committee. I am excited and enthused about the encouraging, wonderful cooperative relationship that's blossoming. I am committed as a neighbor to help the rest of my neighborhood embrace this opportunity. And I am excited to become involved with my local Board of Education, as well as my neighborhood, as well as the high school. I'm here to heartily endorse and support not only these lights, but the continuing dialogue, because my vision goes much, much beyond that. My vision sees a community that interacts back with the high school. My vision sees a community that helps support the kids and that they see us as a supporting membership, not just those houses that are on the other side of the railroad tracks. So my opportunity just begins with these lights, and I do not see a horizon on it yet. And I thank you for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you. That concludes our public comments section of the agenda. The next item is Superintendent Communication. Dr. Krizik.
As Mr. Hill and Mr. Gills have indicated, the York Stadium issue has been in discussion for a good 9 months or almost a year. And we embarked on a process to affect an ordinance change starting in August. But there was many developments that resulted as a result of that action. Tonight, to kind of give you some background information about where we have come and where we are going, we have several community members who have either been part of the York Community Advisory Committee, current members, and or as well as interested citizens who are going to speak with you this evening. So I'm first going to introduce Mr. David Kleinens, who will do a presentation for you this evening, and then he will be introducing some additional individuals this evening. So if we can give a warm welcome to Mr. Kleinens.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight, and I'm just going to jump right in. And I think We all know that putting the turf in was a game changer for our community, and it was in a real positive way. You know, I've seen more kids and more athletic programs on that field, band students on that field, at a whole variety of times. So, you know, I think we accomplished our goal, and I think we're all excited about the utilization of the field. An unintended consequence of that utilization, and something I didn't foresee, and I was, you know, one of the donators to the field and one of the supporters of the field, was the impact it had on the surrounding neighborhood. And that's what we're really here to talk about tonight. And I think people can read the slides. You know, I think the neighbors, you know, there was an old ordinance that said there was, you know, 12 allowable lighted games during a calendar year. And when I talked to the neighbors, nobody was keeping count. Nobody had a ticker or counter in their office that was keeping track of the games. But all of a sudden, when the new turf came in, there was a substantial change in the volume and the light at the field that was inconsistent with anything they experienced in their prior years. And it had to do with the increased use. And so a group was formed. I thank the leadership of Lynn and Diana Smith to form this group. I sat on it as a community member with many of the neighbors. And I have to admit to you, at first I went in and as kind of a, hey, we can't let these people take this opportunity away from our kids. And what I came away with is the neighbors are a reasonable group of people, and there's really two glaring issues. And there's probably a bunch of issues, but if we had to tease out the two biggest issues, they're the light and the sound. And the sound fix is underway. Jacob mentioned it earlier. Jacob, Tom Cugino, some of the other neighbors have mentioned to me, it's been better recently since they've turned off a bank of speakers that were projecting volume to the visitor stand when they weren't required. And if you have questions on that, I'll draw them up later. But all that a sound fix is underway, light improvements are required. So here's the proposed solution. And I'm going to say this before I jump into the solution. I don't feel the solution exists with time, date restrictions, artificial barriers for the field use. We've been working down that path since last August with many different iterations, and I don't think we're going to find a satisfying solution in that process. I think the real issue is the lights are glaring into people's homes, and if it's dim and quiet, I'm going to quote a neighbor, if it's dim and quiet, we don't care who's on the field. And so we're working on the quiet, that's underway, let's get the dim going. And so here's the solution to fix the problem. It's to, you know, through a refundable guaranteed grant, through the District 205 Foundation, procure new lights. Abandon kind of the contentious dialogue that we've been going through and you've seen in the papers. And for me, avoid the inadequate legislative process. And that's not a knock on the city. It's just they're too far removed from what's going on in the community right by the school and with the school. And some of the solutions proposed don't take into account the full level of activity that has to go on at the high school. And the analogy I use is, you know, we've raised 5 boys. We have 3 of them still at home. And when 2 of them come to me with the solution, neither one of them really gets a positive outcome, you know, through some kind of contentious dialogue. So let's avoid that process, and let's use, and I'm with Greg, let's use the light and sound changes as a foundation of trust to move forward in the community. So, you know, why is it needed? You know, community relationships are a big part. I think we can all be on the same side as opposing sides. And I think the other is there's more we're going to want to do at the high school. And if we're in a fractured relationship with the neighbors that exist at the high school, it's going to be very difficult for us to accomplish future activities, ones that we can't even foresee. So let's get on a glide path to solving some of these issues. Secondly, we want to maximize the field utilization. Participation in athletics has went up substantially since my kids have been involved in the school system. And everybody that's come before the school board when I've been at past meetings has talked about the import of that on their lives, their grade performance at school, and their tethering to the high school and friend groups. So let's keep that going. And then, you know, why new lights? Let's get a positive outcome. Technology and formal continuing dialogue is a better solution and less cumbersome than the path we're on today. So if people want to get a feel for what the impact of the lights are, I pulled 2 slides from the light provider, not the installer, but the actual manufacturer of the lights. And here's one of them. We have lights from about the 1986 period. So as you can see, 35% of the light hits the field. The rest of it shoots off vertically, horizontally into people's homes in the atmosphere and creates that glare we see around the field. With today's technology, we have the ability to capture 70% of the light on the field. So that's a significant improvement. This gives you kind of a feel for one stand is the before look, one stand's the after look, and you can see the light redirected on the field. And the school board should know we've spent a lot of time talking to other schools. We've called every other athletic director in our conference. Hinsdale Central, Oak Park have recently put in the lights that we're looking at and have been very excited about what they've done in terms of increasing the utilization of the field, how the lights are directed on the field and don't spill in the community, how they're more than adequate for some of the small ball games that go on the field, such as lacrosse, where the ball size is very small. And kind of something I hadn't figured, they're very happy with the digital control technology that comes with the lights. So the ability to put in a week schedule ahead of time, have the lights turn off, versus kind of the manual structure that we have today with the lights. And here's a look of what the lights used to look like, how they've moved through time, and what they'll look like. And it's hard in black and white to get a feel for the glare. So we've went to the field, and many of you have probably seen games at Hinsdale or Oak Park. So to conclude, we've gotten the money. It's in the District 205 Foundation. And what this is, requirements for success, this is really something when I sat down with the grantors who are providing the money, that they said these are the things we're going to need to be successful. And one is District 205 and York agreement with the proposal. Second is a formal neighbor agreement. And you've heard, and Jacob and Greg in their 3 minutes didn't have time to go into great detail, but we met with the neighbor group on, I think it was May 16th at the local library. Jim Collins was in attendance. John Rutter from York was in attendance. And they all had the opportunity, as we did, to sit down with about 25 neighbors. And we shared with them the proposal. And I think overall the feedback was very positive. I think there's some, to be frank, there's still some people who feel like, hey, this is a first step. There's more to be done, but it's a great first step. Booster commitment. We're talking to the boosters to be an anchor donor in this process. And fundraising efforts. The grantor is, hoping that the money will be repaid someday. There's no strings attached. There's no liability for taxpayers or for the District 205 school board. But we're initiating fundraising activities so we can hit up the same group for other ideas we have at York in and around athletics and other areas. Summer 2011 install is an important criteria. Let's get it done in the down season. And District 205 participation as a tax-deductible funnel for the grant money was important. And I think we're well on our way with most of these. And so I'm here to answer questions and ask you to support this process.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you also for your hard work, your research, your legwork, your meeting with the neighbors, for getting this off the ground. We really appreciate it. Are there questions for Mr. Kleinhans from board members? Mr. Collins.
This is probably a joint question for you, Dave, and Dr. Krizik. As you pointed out, I did attend that meeting. And I would say that of the neighbors that attended, I agree with your assessment that it was very positive. One thing I heard, though, was that the neighbors very much wanted to keep meeting because who knows what can come up. I mean, if we're going to be good, successful neighbors, and I'm speaking for the school district, in our neighborhoods, we need to keep talking. Is there a plan in place to continue the York Association and keep meeting with the neighbors?
I'll answer my piece and then turn it over to Lynn. We had the opportunity to sit down with Diana Smith at York and John Rutter, and I think three real positive things came out of that. One is there's already a vehicle for this to occur, and that's the York Community Advisory Council, which existing neighbors and community members sit on. And that's the group that's came up with a compromise initial proposal that has went through the city council process. So I think a vehicle exists. And I think there's been a new member added, and what I heard from the neighbors is some of them would also like to throw their hats in. So I think there's already been some good leadership by the school in that area. And I think a second thing I heard from Diana is a desire to implement a district policy, absent any legislative policy, a district policy and a school policy on here's how we're going to use the field and here's how we're going to be in terms of a neighbor in the community. And I viewed that as very positive. And Lynn, I don't know if you have any more.
Just the second thing, in meeting with Rachel Shepard and John Rutter just earlier this week or at the end of last week, there's a commitment to, for the YCAC committee to meet on a monthly basis. I think the issue is that when you let too much time go by, an accumulation of issues comes up and things can rise to a level of crisis. So there has been a commitment to meet with this group on a monthly basis, again, to be proactive. So both of those things, I think all of those things complement one another, but it is a wonderful opportunity to have a consistent ongoing dialogue and look for opportunities for which the York school community could also benefit the neighbors. And I think that can be part of the discussions as well, in terms of what service learning opportunities might be available for students to assist in assisting neighbors who live around the stadium. So the YCAC committee is the vehicle for which those conversations will take place. And so I think we're very happy with the structure that was put in place and Mr. Rutter's commitment to ensuring that it goes forward.
Any other questions by board members? Mr. McDonough.
Could you outline briefly the way the fundraising will work, the guarantee in place, and the district's involvement in funding?
Sure. The district's involvement is zero at this point. And so is Lisa here? There you are. Okay. So maybe Lisa can talk a little bit, but the money's been provided already at the District 205 Foundation, directed for the purpose of replacing the lights at York Stadium. So the money's in-house, not a portion of it, all of it, and over and above the amount that was the winning bid for the light installation. And that's to account for some of the auxiliary lighting that will have to occur from an exit standpoint around the stadium. So that's in existence, and Lisa, do you want to talk about how the money flows to the school, or are they interested in that level of detail? Okay. Yeah. They say yes, please. And while you're coming up here, I'm going to give a brief update because my phone is beeping like crazy, and I'm the only one at home, and it's my youngest son telling me the Bulls are down by 1 with 2 minutes to go and the thing. So I didn't mean to look, but I thought it was a crisis. All right.
That is a crisis. Hi, good evening. I'm Lisa Finelli. I'm the Executive Director for the 205 Foundation. So basically, the foundation received from a benefactor the funds necessary to begin this project and actually to complete the project. And then the funds we have an agreement with the benefactor, the foundation does, and then the fundraising will begin, and the benefactor will basically receive monies back so that the benefactor didn't have to contribute the entire amount of the project. So it is really the community that we hope will be fundraising for the project. However, the money is there, the money is committed, so there are no liabilities for the school district at all.
Any other questions? Mr. Bloom.
So can you go through the mechanics of, so that's how the benefactor got it to the foundation. Now, how does the foundation's relationship with 205, how does the money get to 205?
Right.
What are the obligations? I mean, how is that relationship?
Well, we are providing the money to District 205 as what we call a just restricted gift or restricted donation. So there are not strings attached, but I mean it's used for the purpose solely of this project. So the project and out-of-pocket expenses up to a certain amount of money. And then the fundraising will begin, and as I said, we have an agreement with the benefactor that people will be able to write a deductible donation, a charitable contribution to the foundation for this project. So that's the big benefit to the community.
So does the money go into a 205 account, or how does the district get the money?
Oh, yeah.
Ms. Masterton.
Yeah.
No, the donation is put into our capital projects fund, and then the expenditures are also made out of that capital projects fund. So it's revenue into the capital projects fund, and it's marked as, I think that's what he's asking, and that's where it would go.
The money will stay in the District 205 Foundation account until such time the bills come in to be paid on the project. And then the District 205 Foundation will then remit that amount to be put in the capital projects where the money will go out. Because the commitment of up to $150,000 is not a flat $150,000, because if the project comes in completed at $124,000, that's what the foundation will remit to the district when the bills come through, and then the remaining portion goes back to the benefactor as unexpended dollars. So the money stays in the foundation account, and once the bills come in for the project, they remit it to us, and then it follows the process that Ms. Masterton just identified.
But it is shown as a revenue into our capital projects fund from private donations.
Yeah, I'm just looking at
and then
cash
go
right
from
now.
there.
I mean, how you account for it, I mean, you're the expert.
Mrs. Ebner, did you have something? You had your hand up.
I had a quick question. Is there anywhere in writing that the district is not liable for this project?
Yes. There is, well, there's a proposal between our organization and the benefactor, and I do believe that that's stated in the proposal, in the agreement.
Mr. Collins.
I'm concerned about the unintended consequences, since this need for lights is really an unintended consequence of renovating the stadium. And I guess this is probably a question for Mr. Hsu. Is there enough, because my understanding of the technology employed here, once you cross a line of where there is light versus where there is no light, where there is no light, it's dark. And right now, the spectators and the participants of the games on our field use that light spill for their own personal safety to see their way out of the stadium. So I can anticipate there'll be some need for auxiliary lighting in the areas that are off the field that will now be dark that used to be light. Is there enough money in this grant to be able to afford that ancillary lighting?
Well, I have a long walk for a short answer, but yes.
Good to see you, though.
While we haven't designed it, and assuming that the project is done as timely as it seems it will, we will run the lights, find where those dark areas are, and install the lights in-house. We fully anticipate that the Spring Road Gate, the Visitors Gate, maybe some of the areas that the boosters utilize will be much darker than have been experienced in the past. We have kind of benefited from that light spill, which is obviously such a large problem for the neighbors. It has allowed us to do things like sell tickets, walk safely up and down curbs, and things of that nature. I anticipate somewhere in the area of probably around $5,000 in actual materials. Those are lights, those underground cables and direct burial wiring to light those areas. And I fully anticipate that we won't have any difficulties that preclude us from a new network in-house and utilizing on-staff regular time labor. So that would bring us in well under budget. We have a larger contingency for that because of the fact if we ran into a larger problem, we had some unforeseen staffing, personnel issues or anything, and we had to turn to a contractor, we'd expect to pay obviously a lot more to get that done than if we're able to do it in-house. But both contingencies are covered for under the $150,000, and I would fully expect us to come in much, much lower than that.
And what is the financial difference between the $150,000 and what the winning bid for the stadium lights came in at?
The winning bid was $117,397.
Okay, so you've got roughly $30,000.
Yeah, well, 10% of that I was considering a contingency on the actual work to be completed, and then a $20,000 lighting contingency. So if we were to keep it to $5,000 in lighting, and I did not use any contingency on the project, which, given the fact it's a straightforward replacement, we shouldn't, we'd probably be looking at a realistic budget number of somewhere in the $122,000, $123,000 level. Definitely not in the approaching $150,000.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mrs. Hirsch.
Can I add one more thing on the fundraising before the question? I just want to recognize the community members who've already started the fundraising, the donation, and let people know it's not just people in the broader community. Some of the neighbors, specifically Jacob and Greg, have said, you know, we're more than willing to donate, and I think that shows how on side we are. And finally, I'm going to recognize the Musco rep, who, when we sat down and said, hey, this is going to be a privately funded initiative, we'd like to sharpen the pencil, and it's going to be close, and it's going to be hard to get it done. They've chipped in another $4,000, so we're really at $113,300. And I know the installer will have the same level of generosity. So, maybe. So.
Mrs. Hirsch.
First of all, I want to thank you, David and Frank and Lisa and
Jim
Mr. Ruprecht and our Musco representative, and I see a couple of Terry Horn and some people from the foundation in the audience. Thank you for pursuing this on our behalf. When this first arose months ago, it was very troublesome to me personally that we got off, we were behaving badly. We didn't have a clear way to communicate with the district. We didn't necessarily respond in what was deemed an acceptable way to the concerns that were raised by the neighbors. And my overarching concern, while this is a discussion about, I'll call this a patch, a fix to a specific component of the problem, my opinion is that we as a district, we as a large part of the community need to be an excellent neighbor, both to the neighbors that surround York High School, with regard to the chillers, we've had issues with regard to the lights and the sound and traffic and litter and parking, and there are many, many ways that we need to monitor our behavior. We need to have clear expectations set and communicated to all of the staff that are involved, not just from a facility standpoint, from an operations standpoint, the coaches and those kind of things. And my concern really rests with the other boxes that are still up there. The lights, we're so thankful and appreciative and flabbergasted, honestly, that there's a community member that's willing to step up and write a big check to try to fix this for our kids. But that's just one small component of it. It isn't small when it's shining into your house, and I understand that. But more importantly to me is that we as a district are responsive and we're respectful neighbors, and that we work collaboratively and that we listen carefully to concerns that are raised and try to work collaboratively and come up with compromise and find a way to move forward. And in that vein, the players that are here tonight and the players that have been negotiating this are not always the players that are going to be thinking about this and talking about this and resolving issues 5 years forward. And so what I'm really looking for is, we've decided in our little board discussions, this is a word that's overused, but a memorialization, documentation, you know, a written policy guidelines understanding of what the roles are, what the role is of this advisory committee, what the role, who to contact at the high school specifically, and to make that very public. There are some details that I would like to see us formalize and memorialize, so that it's not something that we all feel really good about finding the money from a generous donation and fixing it for the upcoming school year, but this is a long-term solution, that we have a good working relationship and that we are honoring our neighbors. So I have some concerns that we're moving ahead. One of the pieces is moving right along. We've got a proposal that we're asked to accept a donation from the foundation to fund the lights, one component of the problem. But I want to make sure that we are not leaving behind the District 205 and York agreement. I'm just looking at your boxes, Dave, that you know, are kind of giving us an overview. You know, a formal neighbor agreement, I don't know that we have a formal neighbor agreement. I think we've got some kind of consensus and progress made in discussions, but those are the areas that I don't want to go barreling ahead with the lights and make sure that we address all of these issues.
Any other questions for Mr. Kleinhans? Mr. McDonough?
Dave, again, I appreciate everybody's work and who's come forward on this, really stepped up to the plate to hopefully make a good result here. My concern is with the connection to the relief we're looking for. There's an ordinance out there that has to be amended. It currently says 12 dates. It was written in 1986. It needs to be amended, repealed. The fact that the funds are coming from another source makes that probability of success less of an issue for us. But we still want to know, as the school board, concerning the use of the stadium, how is this expected to play out with the city and the city's completion of the ordinance?
I think that would be conjecture, and I think I'll just share with you some direct dialogue we've had with the city. The next opportunity, the next step in this process is to go to the DPC, which is a group of 3 city council members who are going to get a proposal, which in some ways is much broader, in some ways more restrictive than the proposal that YCAC recommended, and that's coming from the Zoning and Planning Commission. So that proposal is being sent to a 3 city council member group. There will be an opportunity for feedback. I've spoken to 10 of the 14. I know Jim's spoken to some of the other city council members. Each of them really has to represent themselves. My overall general feedback is they view this as a positive development, and but really the city council process will have to continue through its legislative and administrative steps, and the next step is a June meeting. And I think at that meeting, my testimony will be, there's a better vehicle to accomplish this, and we may have the lights project underway, and then we'll stop talking about lights for a while. And so we'll earn the right, I think, to ask, for a broader ordinance.
But by the first event in the fall, that ordinance has to be changed in some way, and so some result will have to happen from the city.
Or a conditional use permit based on the ongoing requirements, but all of that is really outside of our control. This is a process that's running concurrent to that.
But we will be using this upgrade as a main rationale for releasing or reducing restrictions on the use of the stadium.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think, some of the neighbors are here. They've committed to coming to some of those meetings. And I don't know that the 3 of us would all agree on what the terms would be, of what the new ordinance would look like. But I think, overall, people would feel more confident in a successful resolution to this process than anything that's gone on in the city process to date.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I would, with the permission of the board, like to take another thing out of order on our agenda this evening and ask that we go directly at this point to the superintendent's agenda that contains the approval of the restricted donation from the District 205 Foundation and the approval of the lighting upgrade bid. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mr. McDonough has moved that the Board of Education accept the anonymous restricted use donation to underwrite the light retrofit project at the Clarence D. East Field at York High School. Is that a fair statement of your motion, Mr. McDonough? Is there a second? Moved and seconded by Mr. Collins. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Collins? Okay. Roll call. This is a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. That motion carries. We would like to thank the foundation and its role in this project. Did you want to make a comment right now, Mr. Collins?
Yeah, if I can, I think this is a great example of private money coming together with our school district to do great things for our kids. I want to thank, first of all, the anonymous donor or donors that have made this possible. I want to acknowledge the York Neighborhood Committee for their efforts in talking and keeping the lines of communications open, and I hope that that continues forever. I want to thank Dave Kleinhaus and Jim Ruprecht for all their efforts to make this agreement possible. And I also want to thank, actually, there's a few things that have worked out really well because of some advanced wisdom. And that thanks would go to Frank Shue and Lynn Krizik for making that initial bid good for 120 days. Because the three meetings ago when we originally brought this to a vote, it wasn't even brought up as a possibility. I also want to thank David Carlquist for his vision to suggest that we not vote on it at that meeting, that we let that 120-day option ride and see what happens. And since we've done that, some very, very good things have happened. So I think this is the kind of management of the district that is tremendous and tremendous for our kids. So I just want to say thank you to all those involved.
Thank you. I think the entire board echoes your sentiments. We have some funny Robert's Rules of Order business to do now. As you had stated, there was a motion on the floor at the March 22nd board meeting. We need a motion to take that off the table right now and consider it this evening. Moved by Mrs. Stufen. Is there a second? Seconded by Mrs. Ebner. We now have a motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. We now have before us the motion identical to the March 22nd motion, which says that the Board of Education would approve the low bid for the York Stadium lighting upgrade in the amount of $117,397 from Adlight Electrical Company. Is there a motion to that? Well, we have that motion. We took it off the table. It's there. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mrs. Walsh, could you call the roll?
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mrs. Ebner? Yes. Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mrs. Droney?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
7 ayes, no nays. That motion carries. Well done, all of you. One of the reasons we're doing this tonight is so that the lights will be in place for the fall season. And we really appreciate all of the work that has gone on over the last 10 days or so to make this happen for this meeting this evening. It's a good thing for the students of Elmhurst. We really appreciate all of the work and background work that has gone into it. The next item on our agenda is the Title I school overview. Back to Superintendent's Communications, Dr. Krizik.
And I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Sullivan. And Fisher Principal Jane Bailey.
And now for something completely different. Right, Jane?
Oh, and we are.
We are here just to provide some information for you tonight about Title I programming in our district. Title I is funded under the No Child Left Behind Act, and it targets students who are at risk of not meeting our learning standards. We receive our funds based on our free and reduced lunch count numbers, so it's based on poverty rates. That's how the funds are generated. However, students qualify by whether or not they are at risk for not exceeding learning standards. So it's funds are based on one thing, but the criteria for students who qualify for that is based upon whether or not they're doing well in our schools. So we want to talk a little bit about Title I and their programming options. And there are two programming options. We have always been what's called a targeted assistance schools. We've had targeted assistance schools. That's when your schools have less than 40% of a low-income population. And that's a school that provides some supplemental services for students, those students identified as having the greatest need. Schools that are greater than 40% low income have the option of being a school-wide program. And that is a comprehensive reform model that really looks at upgrading the entire educational program in the building, or the ability to. So in a targeted assistance program, you have to be very specific about how you spend your dollars. In the school-wide, it's pretty much whatever you need to do to improve that particular school. What we are looking at are our Title I schools for FY12. We had to declare these to the state. And these are our low-income eligible schools. Fisher, as of the date that we did this, which was April 4th, and had to report this to the state, was at 47.4% low income. That was a significant jump. In 2009, they were at 31.34%, and in 2010, 34.8%. So you can see from just 1 year, from 34.8 up to 47.4%. Churchville, current average is 25.5%, not as much of a significant jump. They were in the 20s last year. Field, 12.7%. That was an increase for Field. How the state and the federal government looks at Title I targeted assistance schools are any schools that are at or above the district average are eligible. So our district average was 12.1%. So any school who fell above that 12.1% are eligible. York is technically also eligible. They're at 12.9%. And York has pretty much, at least since I've been here, always technically been eligible. But a number of years ago, the decision was made to not have Title I funds at York. That's really also related to when you do have Title I schools at a building, you are under the federal sanctions for not meeting AYP under No Child Left Behind, which can be significantly onerous. So at that time, a number of years ago, I think they moved to put the Title I money to Churchville, and then more recently, we've looked at elementary schools. Okay. Fisher now, because they are over 40% low income, are now eligible to apply to be a school-wide program. So that is why we're here to talk to you about that, because there's a process that we need to follow for that. The differences are that in a targeted assistance program, as I said before, you can only provide supplemental educational services, and that's what we've been doing. We've been providing summer programming, after-school programming. This past year, we also did another half-day kindergarten for those students who came for one and then qualified. In essence, we're keeping them for a full day. So we've done some things like that. Churchville has funded a math interventionist position that we don't have. So they have to be things that you aren't doing in your other district buildings. It has to be supplemental, something that the district's not providing in other places. And you have to identify only specific students. So those students have to meet those criteria of being at risk of not meeting standards. And only those students can have access to those funds. Under a school-wide, you have greater flexibility to use your funds for anything that you think in that school is going to improve education. So Title I funds in a school-wide program really don't have any of the same restrictions or requirements. And so that's what we are really looking at in terms of moving Fisher toward. The process, you have to notify ISBE. We have done that we're in this process. You have to have a year of planning. They require that you go through a year of this planning process, which Jane is going to share with you a little bit. You have to have certain individuals, it's pretty prescriptive, involved in the planning, including parents, school staff. We'll have a consultant from the state board that will be part of that, looking at our things. We have to make that plan available to the parents, to the general public. There are 10 required components that Jane's going to tell you all about. And then the reason we're bringing this to you and talking to you about this is this plan will have to come back to you in May, this time next year, for you to look at, and the law requires that the school board approve the plan in order for us to move forward, to be a school-wide program. And then as part of the process, you also have to conduct an annual evaluation. So I'm going to let Jane talk a little bit about what we're going to need to do.
Okay. We've actually got some things underway. A comprehensive needs assessment. 3 of us went to a parent involvement seminar. They gave us the needs assessment. Wasn't that nice? So we already have that. School-wide reform strategies. We've been working on those. Instruction by highly qualified teachers. That's obviously in place throughout the district. Professional development. We are working on that. I'm going to understanding poverty workshop in June. Parent involvement. I already have parents interested in this. Oh, sorry, skipped 5. Attracting highly qualified teachers, and we do. Parent involvement, we do have a couple components in place. Watchdogs would be an example. We're bringing dads in all the time to sit in on classes and be a part of the school, which has increased overall school parent attendance at things. Whether it's Bragg night or tonight was a performance, the gym was packed. It was only 5th grade. It was amazing. Preschool transition, we have had a great transition just this year alone from EC to Fisher. I think we brought in 36 kids. That's amazing. In the past, it's been 6, 7, 8, 36. Including teachers in the decision-making, we are there. We are working on professional learning communities, effective, timely, additional assistance to students. Again, working on it. Coordination of federal, state, and local programs, and that will be, part of the challenge. Benefits of operating a school-wide program, we have flexibility. We can consolidate resources. We can serve all students. When you're targeted, they can literally come in, audit us, ask for a list, and say, oops, she didn't qualify. You're going to have to refund X dollars. When you're school-wide, it can benefit all students all the time. It includes all staff, whether it's classroom teachers, some of the specialists that are brought in, assistants at various levels of the organization. Everyone's included. And you redesign the school and its services for the intended purpose of improved student achievement. That is Title I. Well, that's a kind of a mini lesson on Title I.
Many of the things that our schools already do in the school improvement process, because we have a very thorough school improvement process here, are really components of this. So there isn't going to be a huge amount that you're going to have to do as a school that we don't typically do anyway as part of our continuous kind of improvement process. But do you have any questions? We just want you to remember, May next year this time, someone's going to be bringing you a plan. Right, Jean?
Someone will. I won't let you forget.
Mrs. Stufen.
So just what you had said, Karen, so we pilot pieces of it before we can go full school implementation, right?
We're required, the State Board of Education requires this 1 year of planning. So you can't become a school-wide program until you do all these steps.
I'm sorry, but you said that you're going to utilize some of the programs from other schools. So, I mean, it's like looking at, you're piloting some pieces of it.
Oh, some of the things that we're already doing with our targeted assistance funds. Yeah, I mean, we could be doing some of the exact same things. It's just school-wide gives you, a whole lot more flexibility with what you could do with your dollars. Now, granted, we don't get a lot of money under Title I, and we have not yet been told what we're going to get for the upcoming year. Our poverty level went up, but so did everybody else's on the list that I saw. Almost every other district went up. I didn't see, I don't think I can remember one that went down. We're all getting our dollars from the same federal pool. So just because your level goes up doesn't necessarily mean your dollars are going to go up. Last year we received about $281,000 that we split. Last year Field did not qualify, so you can bounce in and out. They're back in this year. But this past year was just Fisher, and Churchville. So this upcoming school year, it would be Fisher, Churchville, and Field that will be a part of the program. But Field and Churchville will remain a targeted assistance schools because of their level, and we're looking to at least start that planning process for Fisher.
Okay, so the second piece, I think you alluded to it, but the movement in and out. Is it a big transition when you move in and out, whether it's a full school or supplemental program?
Well, generally, once you are school-wide, you're always school-wide. So there isn't, you're not going to be going back and forth between that. So even if let's say Fisher would dip below, once you've gone through that process and you're school-wide, they treat you as school-wide. So we don't have to do that. But the activities might be somewhat similar. You might not see a big difference in what's happening. It really depends. That's part of what the team's going to look at and see what they think will, what we can do with the limited number of dollars that we receive to have the biggest boost in student achievement that we can get.
Ms. Hirsch. So in order for us to gain flexibility in how we spend the same pool of dollars, we have to do some more paperwork and some more conversations, which can be a very good thing. But basically, are there any downsides that you're concerned about with moving to a school-wide, or this is really, obviously it's going to be more work for you, which we know you work very hard, but are there any concerns that you have related to this?
No, this will be better for the kids at Fisher, because when we do things like our at-risk kindergarten, we have to pay strict attention only to assessment scores. So there's another needy child over here, but they, didn't quite make that cut score, they're out. And that's really not the way we service students, certainly in District 205. They need assistance, we provide assistance. And that's what Title I really does. It's to help level the playing field for low-income kids in areas where there are significant needs. And there's no question that the kids on the north side just don't even access some of the resources of the community.
It breaks my heart that we have one school in our district that has that high of a level of students and families in need. And if this is going to give us the tools to be able to service those kids better, while we can't necessarily address their income concerns, we definitely can hopefully address their academic experience at Fisher. So,
and while this will give Jane a little more paperwork this year, after that, she won't have to do some of the same kinds of tracking on an ongoing basis that she's had to do before. So it'll be easier down the line. So it's worth it.
It is.
It's
so I
definitely
look
worth it.
forward to approving this in May of 2012.
I guarantee you'll see it, Maria.
Mr. McDonough.
Just to clarify, the 281,000 is district-wide Title I, or is that?
It can only be spent at those eligible schools.
At those eligible, and the allocation between those schools is a district decision, or is it based on the qualification?
You know what, it's generally a district decision, though auditors will come in and see what you're doing. In a Title I targeted assistance school, you need to look at what the kids who meet the qualifications. We've generally taken a look at how many students that we're talking about and proportionally allocated the money.
How many students, financial need or academic?
We've looked first at financial because that's how the money gets generated, and then there's never enough, I'll be clear, there's never enough money to do everything that we want to do, but we really look at splitting it out proportionally, and honestly, the principals have been great. We collaborate and work together, and if, an extra couple hundred from one of the schools will help another school do something, we talk together and do that, but yes. Go ahead.
An example of that is we host a summer school at Fisher. It's fully paid for, bus transportation, breakfast and snack. It's a great program. We accept a few field kids that would qualify. They don't have enough to actually run their own program. So we arrange bus stops in the field attendance area and bus them over and bring in 10, 12 kids, something like that from field. That's an example of the collaboration. No, we don't charge field per child. We're doing it anyway. Have your kids come on over.
Right. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate this update. We've learned a lot, and as I say, we will look forward to you coming back in a year. Next item on our agenda is the EPERT feedback summary. Dr. Krizek. As you know, for the past 2 years, we have embarked on making some budget reductions. And after our $2.9 million in budget reductions a year ago, we self-reflected on the process that we had put in place and realized we needed to do something different for the upcoming school year because also the magnitude of the reductions were going to be so much greater. So as we have shared at previous meetings, we sought to find a structure and system that could be data informed and that could help us make some significant decisions with regard to our budget. What we embarked on was by no means an easy process. It was an ambitious process, and it was one that had a great deal of ambiguity and complexity associated with it. That process started with its research last spring, and it went into implementation in the fall, and that started our very aggressive timeline for the school year to go forward. Now, see, I don't know how to use this. Okay. The white? There's, oh, right. Okay, thank you. So what we did is we identified 22 educational programs and 7 operational programs that we were putting through the EPERT process, the Elmhurst Educational Program Review Technique. We created a very aggressive timeline where the communication essentially started actually in late August when we made a first proposal to the district leadership team members, put together a podcast, and then started to disseminate information to staff. We also met with all of the district administrators, school and district administrators, with our outside consultant to kind of give an overview of what the process was going to be. And it wasn't until sometime in late September that the committees began their work. So in reality, the committees basically had from the end of September to the end of December to do all of their data review, data evaluation, generate reports, and identify their 10% reductions and 10% increases so that there was enough time for the reports to be generated, reviewed, and presented in January so that we could provide the Board of Education with enough time to reflect on the data that was given to them and to you, and then to make some decisions. So that's just a review of our timeline. From September to January is not a very long period of time. We finished that process, obviously, in March when you made all of your decisions with regards to reductions and increases for the upcoming school year. One of the conversations at the table has been to get some feedback on our first-year implementation. And again, first-year implementation, a very aggressive undertaking with very ambitious timelines. So I have to put that into context. And this is a journey that we were trying to accomplish, and we were navigating, I think, some obstacles and some challenges along the way. So several weeks ago, we had put out a survey to all of the facilitators, and that included the assistant principals, the principals, and district leaders who served as facilitators to the 27 committees, to all of the committee members, and the committee members included both administrators and every staff member had the opportunity to participate on as many committees as they would like. And then ranking members. Ranking members really were 2 groups of people. Those are the parents and community members that participated in the process. But facilitators were also ranking members too. So when they filled out this survey, they could have checked 2 boxes. They could have checked both facilitator and ranking member. So as you can see, we had 20 facilitators, 129 committee members, and 17 ranking members who completed the survey. The first question was, overall, the EPERT reports contained information that was useful in understanding goals and objectives and outcomes of the programs being evaluated. 60.1% of those that surveyed either strongly agreed or agreed that the information fostered an understanding of goals, objectives, and outcomes of programs being evaluated. Again, this was the first time there was a comprehensive way of even identifying what programmatic goals, objectives, and outcomes were. 39.2% either disagreed or strongly disagreed that the reports achieved that objective.
In answering the question, did the EPERT reports contain information that was useful in explaining what was included in the 10% reduction and 10% increases? 64.4% agreed or strongly agreed that the reports contained information that was useful in understanding what those recommendations were, and 35.6% disagreed or strongly disagreed that the information was useful in explaining those components. When presented with the question, were the reports useful in helping me better understand the costs associated with the programs and services provided by the district? 55.7 strongly agreed or agreed, and 43% disagreed or strongly agreed. I have to point out that this was the very first time that there was an opportunity for people to engage in conversation about what were the components, the component costs for the programs. It helped, I think, change some of the beliefs that program budgets only were representative of materials and supplies, equipment and professional development. The aha moment through this process was that personnel make up programmatic budget costs, and in reality comprise the most significant portion of most program budgets, which, when you are looking at making reductions, is very challenging because we operate very, very lean programmatic budgets that don't include personnel. So that was a good opportunity for that to happen this past year. This next question, overall the EPERT reports contain information that was useful in understanding and or completing the ranking process. What was interesting here is only 34.3% strongly agreed or agreed that the information was useful in understanding or completing the ranking process, and 58.3% said it wasn't useful. We're not sure what to do with this information because it really conflicts with the feedback that we got on the 3 prior questions, which indicated it was useful in understanding the 10% increases and decreases, it was useful in understanding program outcomes and objectives, and it was useful on another dimension. So this seems to be a little conflicting information because if all of that was useful, then we don't know how to analyze this data in terms of how it was not perceived as useful in understanding and or completing the ranking process. In the next question that was asked, did the EPERT presentations complement the written reports? 61% of those surveyed said yes, and 10.5% said it did not. Information presenting regarding EPERT helped them understand the process. That was evenly split. 48.9% said agree to strongly agree, and 48.3% said disagree or strongly disagree. The EPERT process helped to inform and establish budget priorities for FY12. What we found interesting here is that 39.8% said strongly agree to agree, and 58.8% said disagree or strongly disagree. As an outcome of the ranking process, that did establish what the budget priorities were, because we drew a line and everything above the line remained, everything below the line was affected by a reduction, and then those items that were increased started from the top down. So the process does not necessarily match the perception, and that's really what we believe what this question and this feedback is telling us. In the feedback asking for, did the process enable individuals to better understand the value-added quality of each program being evaluated? Only 39.2% strongly agreed or agreed, and 58.8% disagreed or strongly disagreed. Again, this feedback, this ratio of percentage seems to be a little bit in conflict with an earlier question that asked, did the information in the reports foster an understanding of the goals, objectives, and outcomes of the programs being evaluated? That also is the value-added component to that. So again, we're unsure how to basically analyze this portion of the data on the survey. The financial information provided to EPERT committees was clear and understandable. we predicted that there was going to be a very low percentage of people strongly agreeing or agreeing that it was clear and understandable, and that was 34.1% believe that, and 63.9% disagreed or strongly disagreed. In some cases, how our budget is organized made it hard for some committees to really disaggregate and pull out specific costs associated with their programs. A great example of that would be art and art supplies, particularly at the elementary level, where there isn't necessarily a delineated line item that says art supplies, so that we could look at what does Field spend on art supplies, what does Emerson, Lincoln, Jackson, so on and so forth. Essentially, that what had to be extrapolated from building principals saying how much money do you spend out of your instructional supplies on art supplies. So some of that did cause a great deal of concern for individuals as they were going through this process. The other piece that is that we didn't necessarily delineate our costs even in the music program between the middle school and the high school level as well. And so this really was an accurate reflection of, we thought, what people's experiences were with regard to the finances and understanding the finances piece. With regard to the question, as a result of participating in the first year, I now feel better prepared to participate in the future. 61% strongly agreed or agreed, and 30 and 48% indicated that, those numbers, 51%, 51.4 strongly agreed, and 48.6 almost evenly split on this particular piece. The implications here is that it is not just participating in the process that makes you feel comfortable. It is what other supports and whether other ancillary pieces of information or mentoring should be available to help people be more comfortable going forward. Question number 9, the EBERT committee meetings provided opportunities for all those in attendance to participate. The good news here is that of those that responded, 65.5 either agreed or strongly agreed that there was opportunity for all those in attendance to participate, and 30.3% disagreed or strongly disagreed. Last question, the time provided to the EBERT committees was adequate for creating a quality report. We predicted the outcome would be like this based on our very aggressive timelines, and that was 36.5% strongly agreed or agreed, and 58.6 disagreed or strongly disagreed. So that was very consistent with the feedback that we had received, primarily from the facilitators who took on the brunt of responsibility of assembling all of the data and putting into the reports. Actually, the last question, information on when and where the EBERT committee meetings were held was easily found on the district website. 51% strongly agreed or agreed, and 30% disagreed or strongly disagreed. What we created as part of the EBERT processes was an EBERT link, and each committee had the opportunity to identify when their meetings were held. We do know that was not necessarily always updated by each committee, although each committee had the opportunity to post when their meetings were. The issue that we had heard informally throughout the process is that staff wanted to see a layout of all of the meetings from September through December and when those were going to be held, so they can make decisions on which committees they could or could not participate in and what the scope of the magnitude of the scope of their responsibilities were. What was difficult to predict in embarking on this in the first year of the process was actually how many meetings were going to be necessary. And so rather than overestimate or underestimate, only the preliminary meetings started to be posted, which ultimately created conflicts for staff because some committees needed to meet more frequently, and there were only so many days in the week for 27 different groups to be meeting. So there was a lot of overlap and competing times for that. So what are our I'll just say high level, big picture takeaways as a result of this survey that individuals filled out? Well, our big level takeaways begin with that when we look at these results, we need to take into account the adverse impact of the loss of positions, loss of resources, and potential changes to job responsibilities that came as a result of the EBERT process. We weren't creating a new program. We weren't adding services. We were fundamentally making some very tough decisions that affected personnel. And that is really going to affect your participation in the process. Because in some cases, when our budgets are primarily comprised of personnel, issues really we're dealing with the reduction of personnel. And those are very difficult decisions to make, and that makes a process much more difficult when you're going through it for the very first time. It is so much easier to say, well, we can cut supplies or we can cut equipment. But when you're really talking about your peers, it makes it much more stressful, which makes a process much more stressful. Our second takeaway is to optimize what we believe is a very powerful data-informed decision-making process. Additional time does need to be spent mentoring both facilitators and committees in a variety of different areas, including but not limited to discussing program budgets, personnel allocation, what would be appropriate assessment measures and analysis to effectively measure program outcomes and goals, what the formulation of reports could and should look like. And I think as a result of our first year of implementation, we now have exemplars to be used going forward. And there are many exemplars, but the one that sticks out for me as one of the most significant was the music report, because how they approached that was the intention of what the EPERT process was, particularly as it related to if nothing changed in your budgets, what would you do differently to affect different outcomes? And I think they exceeded that goal by identifying how they would reallocate their existing resources to better optimize program outcomes at both the middle school and high school. And then assistance in formulating recommendations. What is acceptable, unacceptable recommendations? Those would be just some of what we believe, based on this survey and the feedback we received, where we need to focus and provide some additional support. The third takeaway is that we need to revisit how the ranking process was approached, including considering separating the instructional from the operational programs. One of the pieces of feedback that we received was it really is difficult to rank an operational program against an instructional program. And again, one of the reports that was given favorable feedback in terms of the presentation happened to be the Buildings and Grounds report. The Buildings and Grounds Committee did a fabulous job of really identifying what their costs were, their program goals, outcomes, and really help people truly understand the devastation that could happen as a result of a 10% reduction. The quality of that report was so high, but people had a difficult time putting buildings and grounds above something like class size or something above a support program for students, early childhood or the like. So we need to revisit what that ranking process is going to look like for instructional operational programs. And our last, again, high-level takeaway is reevaluating the timelines for the beginning and ending of the EPERT process to enable committees to have adequate time for analyzing information, preparing reports, balancing that in enabling the board to have adequate time to make informed decisions. That is what we need to revisit. Having gone through this process once in the first year, the introduction of the process does not need to take as long and essentially can start earlier. And since the board has had the opportunity to go through this process, we could also backward map our timelines a little bit differently. And maybe we do backward map until the second meeting in March to make those decisions versus the first meeting in March, which gives both the board and committees more time in order to put together as quality of a report and analysis as possible. So we wanted to kind of bring some closure to our first year of implementation, to kind of share with you what the results of this survey was. And I think there were again 4 high-level takeaways that came as a result of analyzing this survey. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have about the survey.
Mrs. Steuven. Actually, bear with me. I'm going to actually read through my thoughts here, because this is a lot of background that I have from my professional field. But the EPERT really represents a lot of work by a lot of hard work by a lot of people, and so I personally want to thank everyone because I know what that's like. The survey, the other piece is that the survey results overall show us room for improvement, but that's okay. That's what this is about. It's the first step, just like the dialogue around the lights. We're starting the right process so that we can, really improve and make the district better. It's really our continuous improvement journey. And so I would say that the ePERT is a great foundation. It would be a valuable data-driven tool to monitor and look at the district as a whole. It allows the district to review periodically each program, the value of each program, the linkage to student achievement, targeted outcomes, actual outcomes, the action plans to close the gaps, as well as looking at financial management and accountability and transparency throughout all levels. So I, for one, I know it was painful. It's always painful when you start quality and process improvement processes, especially for people, that have never done it before. It's very foreign. But I think it's good, and I would love to see us adopt it. I would love us to see, look at the results and maybe fine-tune and get more detail so that we really understand the feedback that we got from all the constituents that we surveyed, because I think there's telling information here. Once again, because I've gone through this before, so I know the first time you look at the result, the first time you put together the questions, you put a lot of different things in one question, and you need to start separating that, but it comes with practice. So I would love to see a next phase for that so that we can get really what the survey respondents meant, so it's not confusing to us. And then lastly, I guess from a ranking standpoint, a big thing, what I would like to see is that the recommendations and presentations, and it's not evaluating how well people did it. It's the content and the information. And what we need to do through this process is coach people on how to do it. It's not them that's being bad, it's they don't know what we really need to manage the education as a whole, as a district. And we need, and it's our responsibility, I think, to coach people through that. But to separate the recommendations and the presentations from the program value. That was very difficult, and I know some of my fellow board members had a very difficult time on the rankings from one of those three choices, columns that we had to rank, because the program value said one thing, but the recommendations of the 10% cut or increase was not consistent, and you had to rank based on that. And I think it would give us so much more valuable information if we would separate those two. That's what I had to say.
Mr. Bloom.
What is the process for tweaking the objectives, the process? I mean, I'm sure coming out of this learning, we're going to go, before we get into the next cycle, there's going to be some kind of self-reflection and tweaking. What is the timing and what's the involvement for that?
Well, the next administrative team needs to take this data and the backup data that goes along with that, and make some decisions about next school year. And there has been some preliminary discussion that not all 27 programs need to go through the ePERT process every year, that we choose some of those programs that maybe underwent some significant reductions, and or maybe some that did not undergo any reductions, in order to evaluate the impact of what the reductions and or enhancements was. So there does have to be some discussion beginning, in July, when the new administrative team is in place, and then to outline and put a plan in place to share with you as members of the board of what 2011, 2012 might look like. So that's really what the next step would be, Mr. Bloom.
Okay, are you planning on board involvement in that?
What I would anticipate is that the administrative team would bring back what their footprint is going to look like for going forward, to allow board members to have feedback on what that plan is going to look like going forward.
Okay, because like Karen and Shannon and I had gone through this. I thought it was an extremely helpful process. Probably needs to be redirected a bit, but it was a great first step. I think the board should have been sitting in that room. I would have loved to have seen it broadcast to the entire community on TV if we can do these meetings. It's a great informational vehicle for helping the community understand what it is. The other piece is I would love to see it used as a management tool where each group comes back with, give me your top 3 recommendations about how you can do things better, regardless of whether it's financial or not. You know, sign up for these things over the next 12 months. So then when they come back to us, they say, we promised you that we were going to do these things over the next 12 months. Here's what we did. So, I mean, I'll leave it at that, but I'd love to be involved in that process as we get input, because ultimately we're the ones that have to vote for the, you know, for the solution.
Mrs. Ebner.
I said 2 quick things. One is I think we can streamline the reports. Some of the reports were 20, 25 pages long, and it's just too much detail. I think we can get the coordinator to boil it down so you can really compare programs. And then the other thing is, we did the ranking 1 through 29, and you said a line was drawn and the cuts were made below the line, but actually class size was above that line, I thought. And while I was going through the EPERT process, I thought when the rankings came out, the below the line is not going to add up to $3 million. So you have to, you have to go where you had to, go above to get your $3 million.
Well, in order for us to add $1 million of new expenditures, we had to move the line up. So we had to make a net $4 million in reductions. And that's why we had to go above the $3 million line. Now, again, as you recall, we modified that slightly because that didn't take a 10% reduction. That ended up being a 5% reduction because that would have got us well beyond the $4 million needed to make the programmatic improvements. So the goal was not to take too many reductions, so to speak, but take the reductions from a budgetary standpoint that we needed. So that line will always change just a little bit depending on what the recommendations are going forward of what programmatic enhancements may be in order to improve student outcomes or expand existing programs. Okay? Ms. Hirsch.
The strength of the EPERT process was that we had the staff members who were responsible for delivering the instruction and the program be involved in the definition of the program, of a discussion and some level of documentation of the objectives of the program. And I think the strength of the EPERT process is that for the first time for some of the groups, there was a discussion about what is our function, what is our purpose, and took a first cut at what our objectives are. And I think, Mr. Bloom, you had talked about, that's a professional exercise that we should go through on a regular basis. And I would contend that we take it a step further. And that's actually, we've invested in and we are committed to a professional learning communities model, and that is part of your team discussion. What is our responsibility to deliver this particular set of skills to our students? How do we set those objectives? How do we measure our progress in those? And that's something that should be integrated into our normal annual regular review of the educational services that we deliver. It was unfortunate that we introduced this attempt at rigorous review of our programming because of budget cuts. I think it complicated the matter. I think it made it more difficult for those involved in the process because the time spent wasn't necessarily spent on, let's focus on our objectives, on our goals, on what we're delivering for students, how we measure success. And I think those are the most important things that we want to get from our professional staff. And we want to go a step further. Myself, I want to see what the goal is, an honest assessment of where we are today and what our goal is for 5 years from now, and stepping up how we want to improve that. That's the value in the EPERT process, but unfortunately, because of our financial situation, much of that good conversation, a lot of it happened, and I'm not saying that it didn't happen, but what I'm afraid of is I don't want to lose what those 28, 29 teams went through in terms of defining what their program is designed to do. I would hope that they would go back at the end of this upcoming school year and say, either during the year, refine, here are our objectives, here are our goals. At the end of the year, did we meet them? Did the 10% reduction that we took programmatically, did we have unintended consequences? Is what we predicted would come true really come true? I mean, it's not good enough to me to have the report come to the board, we made reductions based on it, and then we talk about how it was strong and weak and how we can improve it, and we'll do it again next year. We're not done in my book. We're not done until this upcoming school year we've implemented the changes, and at the end of the school year is when we need to look and see what happened. So I think it's a great deliberate exercise for us to go through. I'm not sure how we work it into the schedule that our teachers and our staff already have, very busy. They dedicated a ton of time and energy into this. But I think that's the strength of the program, and that's what I would love to see our district carry forward from this.
I think I want to add a couple of things. It was an onerous process, and really a lot of some of the things that happened were based on fear. Fear for their positions, fear for their support, fear for getting supplies for their programs. There was a lot of fear. And I think as we move forward in trying to continuously improve our fiscal condition, I don't expect that after we've taken $2.7 and $3 million, so altogether $5.7 million, which is almost 6% of our operating budget in reductions, that we necessarily have to look for 10% reductions or even 5% reductions. And maybe at some point in the future, it'll be a positive thing, and it'll be, what would you do with 2% increase? Rather than just, whoever's got the pet project gets some money. It is based on a data decision making. And I know people go, well, I don't think I was prepared. I don't think that I'll be prepared the next time. I think the very fact that they've gone through the process once and written their reports and done what they need to do is such an important part of it. They've learned that assessment is important, and there need to be assessment measures. They've found those assessment measures. Now, part of that assessment is, as Ms. Hirsch has talked about, will be to say, did we meet our goals? If we didn't, why didn't we? If we did, what could we have done better or worse? And so I agree that this was a hard process, but it will actually get easier, and it will slowly become a process in which people are just looking at the work that they do, not just finishing out the year and saying, thank God the summer is here, but actually looking at what they do and saying, we did a great job, or we could have done better.
But Mrs. Hirsch's observation about really what the strength of the process is, and the unfortunate having to blend both of those things together, is really what our experience was too. And while we could intellectually separate it out, that wasn't always possible when people were affected by making those programmatic reductions. So we do think it is a powerful tool to do. That is the strength of this tool, is to, again, it's a continuous improvement tool. And I do think as a result of this, there were some significant conversations when people were asked for the very first time to identify what their program outcomes were, because no one has really been asked those questions before. It is just that this is the way we've always done business in District 205. These are the programs that we have in place. And so they just went forward without any of that critical inquiry. So, we hope it does get easier. And as Ms. Masterton outlined, hopefully it doesn't become as onerous because it's all about budget reductions. But we can, accomplish much deeper, broader goals, as you also alluded to, Mrs. Stephen.
Thank you very much for this report, for doing the survey. Mr. Collins.
Sorry to prolong this, but I remember Mr. Fox, our consultant, saying in the very first meeting that it takes 3 years to get good at this. And I think we've proven him correct. But I just want to echo that it's a good start, it's a good discipline, and it certainly would have been a lot more fun if we were trying to distribute an extra $4 million instead of taking $4 million out. But to me, a couple of things from your presentation tonight, Dr. Krizik, is one, the value of a good activity-based cost accounting system could have made this process far easier, but I know that's not the accounting system that, as Ms. Masterton taught me, that we're given to use by the state of Illinois. But I think that would be an investment that would pay for itself many times over in future years if we were able to develop that second set of activity-based cost accounting books. And I've heard a lot of suggestions, kind of not only here tonight but offline, regarding board participation in the and just hearing the presentations, the ability to ask questions during participations, how very uncomfortable a lot of the staff felt because they felt they were forced to make decisions about cutting their peers' jobs, and that's not was not the intent, I'm sure, and not a position I want to put anyone in. But what I would like to hear as the bottom line from your survey is to, if possible, I guess we're going to have to go back and ask everybody, but particularly the people that said disagree and strongly disagree, ask them what would it take, how could we do it differently to move your vote into the agree or strongly agree column? What would it take differently to move that?
Actually, people had the opportunity to write comments and suggestions as part of that, and we've not completely analyzed all of the narrative that we received, but at first blush, what we were not seeing was constructive answering the question that way, what it was going to take to make it better. We saw more, it was divisive, it should be abandoned. We didn't see solutions. So I think we can probe a little bit more. I think that would be a great exercise for the district, for the facilitators to get together and say, how can we make this a better process? What can we do just to what we believe is to maybe affect the experience people have had? What do we need to do differently? But we'll dig deeper through that data, Mr. Collins, but that's what we were looking for as well, for people to give us some really constructive ideas on how to make it a better process. Not a more time-consuming process, not a more difficult process, but a better process.
And hopefully less time-consuming.
Ms. Masterton. I think one of the things that's going to be really important, and we heard it pretty well, number one, even I think what we found is even our facilitators who were administrators don't necessarily understand finances of the district. And so I think it's going to be really important that the business office works pretty hard to work with those committees, particularly in the first or second meetings, to identify all of the figures and what's going on. One of the things that kept coming up to us over and over again is, well, we could do this by we're having a retirement, and so our program will be cut enough that we'll lose our 10% that way, and we're having that retirement. And what they didn't exactly understand is, number one, you're just saying retirement is cutting the salary, but you have to say you're actually losing a person in that department. That always wasn't an easy way for them to understand it. They also wanted us to individually identify each and every one's salary. And we said we're not going to do that because, number one, it's not necessarily the person in the department who's going to end up being the person that's reduced, because of our laws that we have to do. So we gave them averages. They didn't like the averages. So there are things that we feel pretty strongly that just having a nice discussion with the committee and mentoring them and helping them understand the finances and what we're asking them to do one-to-one, not just from a facilitator, but actually from central office, will be really important in soothing that angst that goes along with all of that.
We're going to move on now, I'm sorry. Thank you for the effort that you took to bring this to the district, and we hope that the notes you leave for the new administrative team will encompass all of these things. And Ms. Hirsch, if you could share that with them away from the table. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes by any board members? The minutes are of the April 6th, 26th and May 10th meetings. Any corrections? Seeing none, those minutes will be approved as presented. The next item on the agenda is the superintendent's agenda. This is the consent agenda. Is there any board member who wishes to remove something from the consent agenda to discuss? Once we make the motion for the consent agenda, there will be no discussion. Mr. McDonough.
B.
Financial reports. We will talk about those separately. Anything else? May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda consisting of the Personnel Report, Freedom of Information Act requests, approval of middle school social studies instructional materials, approval of donation to Jefferson Elementary School, the resolution to appoint the DuPage Area Occupational Education System Board of Directors rep, the approval to dispose of district equipment, to purchase or to approve the Konica Minolta printer copier lease, the Microsoft license agreement, the prevailing wage resolution. Moved by Mrs. Stufen. Is there a second? Seconded by Mrs. Ebner. All those, we need a roll call, please, Mrs. Walsh.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Mrs. Ebner? Yes. Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Mrs. Droney?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
7 ayes, no nays. The consent agenda passes. We have one item left out of it, and that is the item B, financial reports. May I have a motion to approve the financial reports as presented in the board packet? Moved by Mr. McDonough. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Collins to approve the financial reports. Any discussion, Mr. McDonough?
I don't want to have a long discussion here, but as a new board member, what I did want to bring up is that we're lacking a lot of context on a lot of these items that are being put before us for approval. And I know we're all signed up for school board member boot camp, the 3-day training session that's going to happen in Oak Brook. Some of the things make sense. They're able to follow with historical data. Some of them I'm not really sure. Why are we approving 100 pages of check register? Let me just, a couple of other things here. Some of them seem a little bit inconsistent with the policy manual. Section 4.60 looks like contracts are authorized, but we're approving every contract, or every payment rather, even the smallest $1.55 reimbursement at every school. Just wondering how we can get some context, and that might lead to an ability to streamline some of this. 175 pages of payments is not exactly fun, and I'm not sure how meaningful our quote-unquote approval of those are.
You're required, it's one of your duties, that you're required by law to approve the payments that the district makes. And we do that through the check register. No, you don't necessarily have to see every single one. However, several years ago, we were actually commended for our transparency in putting all of that out there. So, you know, it would be at the pleasure of the board, and I'm sure Mrs. Walsh, who's got to, you know, kind of post all of that, to not post it necessarily, and just give it to you. But honestly, you do need to be able to see it because technically, with the exception of emergency vouchers, every single payment has to be approved by the Board of Education before it's released. And so, with the exception of payroll payables and some emergency funds, we hold all of our payments until after you've approved them at the business meeting of the Board of Education, and then they're disseminated after that. And That is a responsibility of the Board of Education. So it would be at you know, what you decide in terms of that. But, you know, it's really interesting, and I appreciate that you want to go for the higher level areas, and I have had boards in the past who literally asked me about what that $1.55 consists of, and so, you know, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another, but it's at the pleasure of the board.
Any other discussion on the financial reports? Motion on the floor is to approve the financial reports for April of 2011. Mrs. Walsh, could you call the roll?
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mrs. Ebner? Yes. Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Mrs. Droney?
Yes, 7 ayes, no nays, that motion carries. That brings us to the superintendent's agenda, which we have completed earlier in the meeting. We have upcoming meetings. The June 14th, our June meeting is a combined business meeting. Tuesday, June 7th, we have a policy committee meeting, and July 19th, the Board of Education meeting. Which takes us to board communications. I have one item that I would like to talk to the board about this evening. I took your feedback from our last meeting about our board orientation meetings. As you know, we sent out a poll to see what dates we would all be available. We came up with 3 dates, June 13th, June 21st, and June 27th. As a school district, when we need legal guidance, we turn to the lawyers. And when we need school board governance guidance, we turn to the IASB, the Illinois Association of School Boards, for that guidance, which is what I did. I sat down and talked with John Castle, who is our field services director for the DuPage division. I think that's what he is. We met for a couple of hours. I outlined for him what was the situation we were in, that we have a very new board. We have 4 brand new board members. We have 2 board members who've only served 2 years, and then we have the old dog. And he listened to our concerns. I said we have a new superintendent coming on board in July, and his first comment to me was, "You need to sit back and take a breath." And I said to him, "I know that, and you know that, but they're having none of that. So let's put together something that will help the board move forward." So he did. He suggested to me a number of things for the June 13th meeting that we have. He suggested that we have some community conversations where we give each board member a couple of minutes to talk about what do we as a district care about, what does the community want. He suggested that we have a facilitator at all of these meetings so that we could be a board of 7 rather than a facilitator and 6 other people. From this meeting, we would talk, the facilitator would help us identify several themes that come out of what do we as a district care about and what does the community want. He suggested then that we pose questions for our new superintendent around those themes so that, for example, we want increased academic rigor. What does that look like? Question for the new superintendent. How do we measure that? That sort of thing. I shared with this idea with Mr. Pruneau, and he was very much in favor of it, looking forward to the output of this meeting. Shannon had offered to meet with me and the facilitator, who I have on hold, to fine-tune an agenda for that meeting, because I understand there's some other things that you'd like to do at that initial meeting. The June 21st meeting, that meeting, by the way, would be an open session with the facilitator from IASB. The June 21st meeting would be district discussions. I had asked Dr. Krizik to put together, based on which of the staff are going to be here, some topics that we need educating on, whatever it might be. We don't know yet. a number of these. They have some ideas, some things that, things like articulation or technology or whatever we might have that we could talk about and ask questions. Finances, for example. The third meeting, we could do one of two things. We could have what the IASB calls a new team meeting, which is something that they take, it's a show they take on the road all over DuPage County, all over Illinois, to help to bring the new team together. Every time, they suggest you do it, in fact, every time a new board organizes and has even one new team member, because the dynamics change so much. We could do that. That could be a closed session meeting. We would not be talking district business. We would be talking how we want to work with each other as a board. The other option for that last meeting is to do a Myers-Briggs inventory, which, as you probably all know, would help us to understand each other's leadership styles, find out where we need to give details to whom and how we would work with each other as a board, how we would come together as 7 different individuals and become a team. We could do either of those in closed session on the June 27th meeting. These were the recommendations of the IASB. They have the blessing of Mr. Pruneau. I just need some consensus from you. I understand that, Mrs. Ebner, you and I have tried to touch base all day. What, you have some comments.
Well, okay. You can go right after me. Okay, so I like what we have here for June 13th. I think that's great. Community conversations. I think it's so important to review what the community wants between the 4 new board members. We've talked to 1,000 to 2,000 people over the last 4 months, so we have a good idea of the will of the community. So that's a great thing, community conversations for June 13th. And then the other piece that would be connecting with the community, the other piece is clarifying our purpose, like what do we as a district care about? I feel like that needs to be broken out into 2 meetings. I don't know how we could accomplish it on June 13th. Those are 2 huge categories, connecting with the community and clarifying our district purpose. So that was just one comment I had, but I like what you have for June 13th. I don't know, it'd be 4 or 5 hour meeting, or, you know, I'm just thinking it would go on too long. So maybe we use one of those dates, you know, split it up into 2 dates. Did you want to go ahead?
Mrs. Ebner. Stufen, I apologize.
There's really, you know, from talking to the board members, there's really 3 objectives that we would like to discuss. 1 is board governance. 2 is the Board of Education and the superintendent and the questions that you referred to in the June 13th meeting. And then 3rd, the district discussions, and from the cabinet members, overview of the district. So especially for us newbies, we get the overall big picture. And the way that you think about it is the board governance, the board and the superintendent, and then the district discussions. And so that we get a really big picture of the whole district, so that when we're trying to govern, that we have the context to which we can do that effectively. So, like, if we looked at your agendas and we slightly modified them, and to Shannon's point of, you know, can we really accomplish all these things in the timeframes? I've referred to the effective school board member, all this IASB, the school board governance basics, and the Illinois School Board Journal, and there's a specific article about retreats. So a slight proposal would be is that we can still keep the June 13th, June 21st, and June 27th meetings, and and if we have to cancel any because we've accomplished this, great, but have the time allotted so that we as a board can start looking at board governance. And what we would utilize is the 6 principles of governing a board. And we can talk about that in open meeting. It would be run like a committee meeting. And then we would move from there to a retreat. And that is in this journal, page 32, 33, talks about IASB recommending for all boards to go off on a 1.5 day to 2 day retreat with the superintendent They even recommend the cabinet members, which some of us said, great. So that would lead into the next phase. And then in between, whenever the cabinet members are available based on their June schedules for finally taking well-deserved time off, we can insert those cabinet discussions. So I would like to propose that approach.
Mrs. Hirsch.
I like that approach. I would make one modification, and that is for the cabinet meetings where we're starting to get into discussion about business of the district, I would actually propose that we postpone those until our superintendent is here and some of our new cabinet members are here. Now, they might not be well equipped in the first couple of weeks to be able to address all of the questions that we have. I think that's a very valuable thing to go through in terms of talking about curriculum and instruction in depth and what it is that we think we're doing well, what it is that we want to see accomplished. But I do agree with the first part of your proposal in terms of having a discussion about the role of the board member, the role of the board, how the board, what our job really is. And this handout, the 6 foundational principles of effective governance, is something that it's not something that we need to talk about the how. It's more board members having a discussion and come to consensus on the what it is that we're trying to accomplish, and having the board set board goals, not district goals. I'm not talking yet about academic performance. I'm not talking about measurements. I'm talking about the 7 of us setting goals and where we want, doing an assessment, learning from the 4 new board members what the perceptions are of our visibility in the community. Is that something that is satisfactory? Is that something that needs work? And I think having discussions at a very high level and coming to some consensus around what we believe these things are going to look like is going to allow the board to set some governance goals separate from the business of the district. And that's really why I feel comfortable conducting these meetings without Dave here, because I feel as though, again, we're a young board. This is extended training, and this is training with all 7 board members present and having discussions about what the role of a board member is. And I think this could be very effective in spending time on these 6 principles in those 3 meetings.
Could I see what 6 principles you're talking about? Thank you. Is there any other discussion? Well, all right, let's take the meeting one at a time. I mean, we don't have to plan all 3 of them tonight. We do have to plan the first one, or else we're going to not have another meeting until we get to it. So I have a facilitator waiting to talk to us to fine-tune that agenda. Can we go ahead with that? Mr. Collins?
My suggestion for that meeting, and that's the one we're going to encompass what we heard from the community. 4 of you within the last few months and 2 of us within the last couple of years, and I think all of us all the time, to make that a brainstorming session where we throw out ideas and then group them into categories, and then I think we have a fairly good outline to work from. So I would suggest, instead of allowing every board member 3 or 5 minutes to kind of spew out what they think, that we just treat it as a true brainstorming session and just let the ideas free flow.
Would you like to meet with the facilitator and get his take on this? I mean, are you interested in their advice? Mr. Bloom.
What is the cost of a facilitator? Just out of curiosity.
The IASB would charge us for that meeting $600.
Okay, because you have that competency within a number of folks sitting at the desk here. I used to do it for a living. I think Maria probably did. Jim's done it before. I know well, all of us have probably done it, but I used to facilitate meetings as a consultant. And the question is just whether it's worth the expense to bring somebody in.
The problem with having one of us do it is then you aren't an active participant.
I understand
I think it's
the other
well
side
worth
of
the
it,
money
but
to invest in our efficiency as a board to have someone who's skilled in doing this for school boards. That's just my opinion. It would be well worth our money to have that. But
I mean, the second part of this too, I mean, my proposal would be to have the last meeting first, the new team meeting, the closed session meeting facilitated, where we kind of get on the same page about how we want to govern ourselves. You know, how we want to set up responsibilities and divide them between people, committees that we may want to form, and responsibilities that we may want to split, to get our ducks in a row. And you know, I understand that this is probably done again when David gets here. And if we were a board that had been here a long time, you wouldn't do this first one because you'd know this. But I think all of us have to get through, you know, what our expectations are around how we're going to relate to the superintendent. I mean, there are clearly, you know, some differences of opinion as to how we're going to do that. And, you know, I would love to be able to have that discussion, you know, behind closed doors before David gets here, because it's a generic discussion with how we're going to relate to the superintendent. It's not a personal discussion with how we're going to relate to Dave. And I wouldn't want somebody sitting in the room as we say, well, I don't think Dave should be involved in that, or I don't want Dave to say, it's us all agreeing on how we're going to govern ourselves, because at the end of the day, we're the ones responsible for this. David's our partner in this. In order to be an equal partner with David, we need to be as professional as David's going to be when he comes through the door.
Mrs. Stufen.
And the functional principles of effective governance, those 6 guiding principles allow us to do that. And it allows us to do it at a bigger picture as the board. And then, you know, the third meeting that Susan's referring to is the new team. How is the board, as we've decided, we've governed, as we brainstorm this, Chris? That's when you bring the superintendent in and you have the new team to say, how do we operate? But your point is really covered through these 6 principles where we as a board can
And
brainstorm.
That's the
Yep.
first, because I think we
Yep.
need to get
Yep,
that set
that's exactly the first.
before
That-
we can roll into the other stuff. I mean, if we try to have a community involvement and brainstorming and whatnot, I think that the big elephant in the room is kind of, let's agree on how we're going to do this before we get into, you know, the rest of this stuff.
Anybody else want to weigh in? We'll now have 7 different ideas of how to do this. Mr. McDonough?
I personally like having a professional in the room. None of us have held public office before. None of us have represented a taxing body before. None of us have sat in a position of government leadership. I think it's qualitatively different, and I think to have a professional there to lead us through these new experiences at the very outset, and then figure out where we're going to go from there. That's my feeling.
Mrs. Ebner?
Yeah, I don't think we're that far apart. I mean, I think the 3 meetings can be community conversations, what did we hear, our board norms, and what do we care about as a district, kind of like our vision. So I see 3 meetings, and I don't really care that much about the order of, you know, how we do that.
So are you not interested in doing the Myers-Briggs to find out how we work together? I'm seeing 4 heads go no. I think it would be an excellent thing to do, because we may have all done it individually in other settings. We've never done it and learned about each other and how we work together. That's what the IASB would say, but 4 no's is good for me. Mrs. Hirsch.
I just want to clarify, I do think that it is very important that we have Mr. Pernod involved when we begin, and we have a lot of work to do in terms of beginning our conversations about how we want to function as a district, and setting metrics and setting goals and digging into the concerns. And there's a laundry list of things that individual board members might express concern about and want to have discussions around. But what I think, from my perspective, these initial meetings are really about our job as board members. They're about how we are going to communicate, how we are going to think of what our responsibilities are. It's really having a discussion about community involvement. Is it something we value, as opposed to digging down into the detail of how we're going to do it? I think individually, we have all had conversations. For those 4 new board members, they've had many conversations during the campaign, and I think it's appropriate for the 7 of us to sit down at one table, discuss it with each other, come to consensus and agreement on what we think the role of a board member is before we start getting down into the meat of running the business. That's why I feel comfortable, and I want to reiterate that I don't want to get into discussions about individual programmatic things. I think that is inappropriate. I wholeheartedly agree. We need our superintendent here. We need our staff here to help us with those conversations. But I think these meetings can be incredibly valuable. I think everybody's stated goal during the campaign was that we create a high-performance team as a Board of Education, as 7 of us that lead the district. I think that's what we read when we reviewed the feedback during the superintendent search from the community. We put that survey out. We received a ton of feedback, 111 pages, that I think should be shared with the new board members so they have the benefit of the feedback from the community on where we think we need to be. And I think that information alone is going to be enough, given that we all like to talk, to take us through these 3 dates.
So how would you outline them? What do you want to do first?
Address that? I mean, once again, the board governance, we could go through.
You're going to get a
these
lot
6
of that
principles.
at boot camp, you know.
No, but we need to talk about what does it mean to us. So if we look at the board clarifies the district purpose, it says a board's primary task is articulate and define the district ends to answer the question who gets what benefits on how much. So what do we all think about that? What do we think about from a governing standpoint? What does that look like to us? Do we agree with it? Do we not? You know, the second one is the board connects with the community. That's when we talk about the community piece. It's the 4 of us on the campaign, Jim and Maria, 2 years on. You have a wealth of information being on the board for 18 years. We could brainstorm, and then common themes, we assimilate it, and then, another meeting. I bet one meeting, if it's an hour or 2, we'd get through only those 2 items, and we've got 6 more principles. So, if we run through them fast, we run through them fast. But I think that we would do ourselves a lot of walking the talk on leadership. This is what new leadership teams do. This is what new board of director teams do, is they come together and they say, what does it mean to each one of us? And so that we have a common message. This is how we're going to govern. Then we take that message into another meeting, which of course we want Dave there. That's when we start talking about the district business. So that's how I'd propose it. So I would propose, whether it take the 3 meetings or not, we outline that we go through each one of these 6 principles and what does it mean to each one of us. And we brainstorm it and assimilate the common themes. And that's creates our Board of Education priorities, goals, whatever you want to call it. They call it priorities. And it's from IASB.
And are you envisioning this happening in open session or in closed session with a facilitator?
I envision it being a working session similar to talking to Jim and Maria and previous board members about how your committees work, your open committee meetings, that it be something like that. Thank you, that's it. A committee as a whole. Yep. Thanks, Jim.
In open session?
Yeah. Jim? Maria? Yeah. I think it's valuable to have the IASB person there when we do a retreat. I think that is extremely valuable. That's when all of us come together, the whole leadership team. And then we start talking about the district priorities.
Well, all right, it's 10:15. We have to bring this to closure. We can do a couple of things. We can decide tonight to do the first one as outlined by the IASB and Dave Pernod and go from there. And at that meeting, decide what we want to do with the others. We can decide tonight to talk about principle number 1, the board clarifies the district purpose, although doing that without our superintendent is a little problematic, but we could form a small committee to talk about how we want to do this and get some recommendations from people who have strong opinions, and we can vote on it. I don't quite know where to go with this. We seem to have some ideas all over the place here, and I want to make sure that everybody's needs are met.
Okay.
Mrs. Ebner.
Maybe Karen, the three of us could talk about it further, or just go forward with what you have for June 13th and start from there.
Well, that would be the easiest,
Yeah,
because
maybe
we'd have to post that meeting and have a time when the three of us could get together, and then when would we bring it back to the full board? Our next full board
let's-
meeting is after the 13th.
Let's just start with what you have for June 13th. I like what you wrote.
Is that okay? We'll go with the outlined meeting for June 13th with a facilitator. I think it's well worth the funds. And we'll talk with him or her at that time about future agendas. Is there consensus to do that? I'm seeing at least 4 heads nodding here. Okay, we will do that. And I can talk with you, Shannon, if you still want to meet with the facilitator to plan the agenda out for that meeting, or we can just go with what we have here, if you're comfortable with that. And then on that night, we will decide what to do with the other 2 meetings. Any other board communications? Seeing none, entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Ms. Hirsch. Is there a second to adjourn? All those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Thank you very much.